Hey folks, welcome back to Ken Michaels Radio, where we're always talking about the Beatles, their group years, their solo years, anything we feel like talking about. Just recently, I came upon an idea for something to do on the show called Beatles Preferences, and I thought it might be a cool idea for the first edition of this show to bring back all the co-hosts, well, the present and the past co-hosts of things we said today and have a reunion here to initiate this new idea. Beatles preferences, what we're going to do in the show is pit two songs against each other or two albums, and they could be Beatles or solo. They have something in common with each other. It could be they're both from the same album if it's a song, or they're albums that came out the same year, or they could be both rockers, both ballads if they're songs, that kind of thing. And this way, we're going to find out from each of our co-hosts how they feel about the song or album that they chose, but more importantly, why. Okay, so we bring back to the show, first of all, Steve Marinucci, who started the show with me, Things We Said Today, all the way back in 2012, a
all
long,
the
long time ago.
all those years ago.
That's right. Back in the days when we were strictly an audio show, we did everything on the phone, on
Oh
landline
my
phone
yes.
and conference calls.
Hmm.
Sometimes the audio quality reflected that. But things have improved since then, especially since we're now a video show. And good to have you back, Steve.
Thank you, Ken. Glad to be here. I will say, working with Zoom, the audio is so much better. I mean, it's wonderful. It's some even just using Skype, the difference is amazing. As I used to, the difference is amazing. I
Right.
love Zoom. So
Yeah. Not only that, there were a lot of people, a lot of veterans that we contacted that didn't want to even think about Skype at the time. It was too new
Hmm.
when they didn't want to invest in something so current that they may not even need. But now a lot of people have their own Zoom page, and or at least we can contact them through their camera on Zoom. So, and it's such a great thing to be able to communicate with people all over the world this way. It's
right.
something miraculous.
Some people still don't like the video, and I happen to be one of those that doesn't. But the audio more than makes up for that. So,
Hmm. Also, of course, we bring back Al Sussman, who was a co-host on the show for many years. You know him for his involvement with the Fest for Beatle fans for so many years, organizing panels and writing for Beatle Fan, and for having written the book Change in Times. 101.
101 days that shaped a generation.
Right. Okay. Most of the time I have it all memorized, but
Sure.
it's always great to have you back, Al, on this
Thank
show,
you, sir.
Talk More Talk and my channel. And
Hmm.
of course, we have Allan Kozinn, who is the co-author of the McCartney Legacy Volume 1 and Volume 2, right behind him. And also got that something, How the Beatles, I Want to Hold Your Hand Changed Everything, and The Beatles from the Cavern to the Rooftop. And for many years working for the New York Times in their classical department. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Ken. Hello, guys, everybody. Good to see you all.
And then last, but certainly not least, is Darren DeVivo, who has been in radio for pretty much the same amount of time as I have, manning the fort at WFUV, and does great work on the air as a DJ and interviewing people and even doing Beatles specials every now and then. Hi, Darren.
Hello, Ken and Steve and Alan and Al, and it's great to be here.
Yeah, it seems like with things we said today, when we come to a special show like the 300th and 400th episodes, we have a reunion. Well, this way, you don't have to wait for the 500th episode. So we're going to do it on this idea called Beatle Preferences. And I just want to stress here that when I mention the two songs or the two albums together, I'm not asking my guests to name what they think is better. Okay? It's what they
Mm.
prefer to listen to now. It could be one and the same. The one you pick could be what you think is better. Doesn't have to be. But the most important thing, as I've said, is explaining why you feel the way that you do. So we're going to start since, as I recall, Al told me many years ago that Rubber Soul was his favorite Beatles album. Don't know if it still is. Is it?
I go back and forth between Rubber Soul, the White Album, and Abbey Road.
Okay.
You can put a handkerchief over the three of them. That's, it can be one or the other.
Okay. All amazing choices.
Hmm.
So I'm going to ask all of you guys, what do you prefer listening to? The British Rubber Soul or the American Rubber Soul? And we'll start with Al.
Of course, you can cheat and do, especially these days with playlists, you can cheat and do the super Rubber Soul playlist, including the four songs from the British album that were not on the American one.
Hmm.
Um, I would just right off the top of my head, I think I would probably have to say the British one, because you've got Nowhere Man, which is probably one of my top five favorite Beatles songs. You've
Okay.
got If I Needed Someone, which is a great George Harrison song, one of his first real kind of folk rock songs.
Hmm.
Um, you've got What Goes On, which is Ringo at at his finest country,
Really?
type. Yeah.
Okay.
And you've got Drive My Car, which is just a great pop McCartney song. And even though It's Only Love and I've Just Seen a Face are both great songs on the American version, I think I just have to give the just a personal preference, since that's what you say,
Yeah.
to the British Rubber Soul.
Okay. But how would you feel about people who think that, well, certainly the American Rubber Soul had more of a folk feel to it, and to start the album with I've Just Seen a Face. A lot of people, when they think of that song, they automatically connect it to opening Rubber Soul, give it a
Hmm.
different feel. The sequencing is similar in many ways on both the
Yes.
American and the British. But
Hmm.
start side one with I've Just Seen a Face and side two with It's Only Love
Hmm.
gave it a different vibe altogether. You
Yeah.
think I've Just Seen a Face or Drive My Car is a better opener than I've Just Seen a Face?
Hmm. It's very close, but I just have to give a small edge, just personal preference wise, to the British album.
Okay. Steve, how do you feel about this?
In this particular case, I would go with the US, because every time I hear the beginning of the album, I always remember the false start. So I think I have to go with the US on this particular one.
Do you like
Um,
more of the folk feel of the US one?
Not necessarily. It's just the sequencing. Having listened to that so much and not listening, not hearing the British one until years later.
Right.
Um, I mean, I feel that way about, for example, about with the Beatles versus Meet the Beatles too. I can only, as bad as um, the sound quality, the mixes are on the American. Um, I still like the American. Although you can play, like you said, you can play around with the albums now, and use the British mixes and do a playlist that way.
Hmm.
Uh, but on Rubber Soul, definitely the U.S.
All right. Um, Alan, how do you feel about this?
Okay, so I have um, different answers depending whether we're talking about in theory or in practice. In theory, well, or maybe it's in practice. I mean, in practice, I basically only listen to the British albums these days. I very rarely listen to the American ones. But in theory, I actually like the American Rubber Soul better. Um, I suppose having, it having been the album I grew up with must play into it, but I don't tend to think that I'm affected by such trivial notions.
Things
Um,
like
but,
emotion.
but it
Hmm.
probably has a lot to do with it in reality. But I also really like, as you say, the folk aspect. Drive My Car is a rock song, and it begins Rubber Soul in a rock way, whereas the Rubber Soul I grew up with was basically a folk, a largely acoustic album. On the other hand, you kind of think that when Paul says "plastic soul" in between a couple of takes of something in the studio, and that's where they took the title from. I kind of suspect that that has to do with "Drive My Car." So if you take "Drive My Car" away, then you're taking away the sort of sub rosa meaning of the album title.
Uh-huh.
But that's okay. Um, I think that I've Just Seen a Face is a spectacular opener where it's just totally lost in the middle of side two on the British Help album. You know,
Hmm.
it's two different things to sort of hear it in the middle of a sequence of songs and to put on the album and the first thing you hear is that guitar intro. That is a great guitar intro, a pity to waste,
Uh-huh.
uh, and It's Only Love also, fits the theme of the album. I mean, everything on Rubber Soul is a love song of one kind or another, whether it's, you know, romantic love or things like in the word, when they say the word is love,
Hmm.
all of that. Now it's, 99% of probably all pop songs are love songs. So, it's hard to make a case for Rubber Soul as a thematic album in that way, but it kind of hangs together as a song cycle that way. And I think that while the British one works that way too, the American one, it's a little bit stronger that way. Because Drive My Car, not really a love song, Nowhere Man, not really a love song. It's a self-deprecation song,
Hmm.
Um, If I Needed Someone is kind of weird as love songs go. It's like, yeah, put your number on my wall. If I'm, bored during the weekend, I may give you a call. You don't really think of that so much as a love song. Although people say the same thing about something, George may have had some odd attitudes here, like you're asking me if my love will grow. I don't know. That's not what you put in a love song. So, so anyway, I'm gonna say American, even though in practice I probably would put on the British one if I were putting it on now.
Okay. Interesting. Darren, how about you?
Uh, Probably the British, and my reasoning for that would be um, for convenience sake. We've had those British albums at our, at arm's length now for however many years, 1987,
Seven.
right? They came out in 7. Um, and it's become the normal listen now for me. And the okay, there's a little laziness involved. To have to go get the US version, find where the CD box set is or the original vinyl, I would always go to the UK and also approach it this is how the Beatles wanted these songs to be heard, so I'm going to listen to them in this way.
Hmm.
And the CD's right here, 5 feet in front of me. Um, the US album, though, um, it was one of the few instances where I think Capitol created something of value by hacking up the albums. Maybe not accidentally, maybe accidentally came up with this different, this folkier, as you guys have been mentioning, um, vibe to a Beatle album at a time when the folk rock thing was exploding. And Capitol helped, I think, push that to the forefront a little bit with the selection of songs that they chose
Hmm.
and the changes that they made to the UK album. And I like the way the US album flows because of that. But again, it comes down to more bang for your buck, more songs, 14 songs. It's readily available, and it's now become the norm. Uh, Normal listen for me. Um, I There's a few classic, all-time great, nobody says a bad word about them Beatles songs that I am sort of with. I love them all, but some of them have to sink to the bottom. And Drive My Car has never really been one of my favorite Beatles songs. I much prefer I've Just Seen a Face. And still, when I hear it, I think about the needle dropping on side one of my scratchy old record. But that aside, I go with the UK Rubber Soul simply because it's more convenient, more music, and it's what the Beatles intended.
Okay. Um, you know, we all know that the Beatles put a lot of effort into the sequencing of the songs on their album, especially with George Martin. And, it was very important that the opening song was a rocker, or as he would call it, a pot boiler. And also choosing what song closed the album. That made a lot of sense. And, there it's such a debatable thing, as you were saying, Darren. This is how the Beatles intended it to come out as it was released in the UK. But then there'll be all those people, like a Bruce Spicer, who will defend
Mhm.
all the American albums because that's how we grew up with them and they have value that way. And there's an emotional attachment that comes to them, and
Yeah,
you get used
sure.
to songs in those orders, even though, like I said, sequencing was similar. Um, but the only thing that's really odd for me with Rubber Soul is that I think Meet the Beatles will always have a special place in my heart because it was the first Beatles album I ever owned. That's the way I heard the songs. I never got into the British albums till the 70s when you can buy them as imports. We're not even talking about the CDs. But Rubber Soul is the only album where I'm so used to hearing the American version that every time I hear I've Just Seen a Face, right after it, I think of Norwegian Wood.
Mhm.
Every time I hear It's Only Love, my brain just thinks girl. Even if I listen to the
Mhm.
British albums, I don't know why that's the only album that's that way, but it might have something to do with how brilliant it was to place those songs there to open side one and side two. So those are
Although,
about it. Hmm?
although this myth that's cropped up over the years that it was this great record company move to give the album a folk rock flavor
Uh-huh.
is nonsense
Uh-huh.
because in those days the guys that were putting these albums together, like the infamous Dave Dexter,
Hmm.
they were not they had no real feel for rock and roll.
Hmm.
Their background was in the big bands and Sinatra, and I think they simply knew that there were these two songs that were on the second side of the British Help album that had not yet been released, much like I'll Be Back a year earlier.
Hmm.
on the British Hard Day's Night album, and they thought, okay, we'll use these two songs on this new album, and this way, of the four songs that are being left out of the American Rubber Soul album, two of them we can put out as a single,
Hmm.
and two of them we can put on another one of these crazy quilt things like what became Yesterday and Today.
Right.
So I don't think it was by design an effort to make the album sound, to make Rubber Soul, the US Rubber Soul, sound like a folk rock album, because
Right.
I don't think they were really all that conscious of what folk rock was at that point.
So from this, we learn that the Beatles catalog as a whole is so uniformly brilliant that you can stumble into making a great Beatles album even without
Bing,
knowing anything about
bingo.
it or having a feel.
Absolutely. Yep.
You
And
know,
you can get a job at Capitol Records.
I've often said you can take any 12 Beatles songs from an American album, and the public will get used to it in the order that you present it in because the songs are so strong.
Absolutely.
All
No
right,
question.
here's our next one. Curious to see what you vote for here. The two great love songs from A Hard Day's Night. And I Love Her, If I Fell. Which one do you prefer of those two? Look at Alan's face.
I don't know how you're going to do that.
Yeah.
I didn't say this was going to be easy. Let's start with Steve.
Oh boy. Do I
Put you on
I
the
just
spot.
yeah, really. Let me just make one comment to what Al said, that I don't think there was that much thinking that went into those to the
Yep.
process of putting the albums together. I think it was basically just to put something out, period.
Mhm.
Yep.
That's all they were doing. That's all they were doing. Anyway,
Yep.
um so and I Love Her and If I Fell. mm, I think I almost have to go with If I Fell, only because the the moment, or the picture of the scene in A Hard Day's Night is stuck in my brain. Um, and not the fact that he was, playing around with Ringo, but the fact that his face, was so um I don't know, or earnest, I guess is the word. I mean, the cinematography on And I Love Her was really nice.
Hmm.
And I have to say that my love of black and white photography stems from A Hard Day's Night. I love it. I've been posting pictures that I've taken on my trusty old iPhone in black and white now for a while, and it all has to do with A Hard Day's Night. And one photo I did the other day had a kind of a shining light that reminds me of the end. I Love Her, but in this particular case, I have to say If I Fell. I just think it's I get like I said, I think the scene in A Hard Day's Night really takes that.
Hmm.
So
Whenever you hear those songs, do you automatically think of the movie, or can you just look at it as
no,
songs?
I don't think I automatically think of the movie, but when you're pitting one against the other here, and you're saying we're taking them from A Hard Day's Night, um, um, I think that really does it. I mean, that really, you've kind of conjured up an image, at least for me. I don't know
Uh-huh.
how the other guys feel about it, but for me, it does. So,
Okay. Well, every song from A Hard Day's Night in the movie has a classic scene behind it. So
well,
you
true.
could
Hmm.
all
That's true.
already just picture it in your head.
Right.
But it's curious to see how you guys feel about these two songs. How about Darren?
And I Love Her. Always been one of my favorite McCartney love songs. And I always these songs always take me back to when I first heard them for the first time, and how I always thought the title "If I Fell" was rather awkward. What? If I fell? And that stays with you. You know, um, those early memories. I didn't quite understand what that was all about. But and I love her. I remember always being, to my very young ears, something special from McCartney. Um, and it's basically that's all there is to it for me. It's just a lesser, or two two greatness A and greatness B.
Right.
You know, throw a dart up against the wall. I always get the capital singles confused. What was the A side? What was the B side? What came out here? What was in a single in the UK? And I had forgotten that. And I Love Her and If I Fell were paired together as
Yep.
the A and B side of a single in the US.
Mm.
And what a single that was. What an interesting choice to put two love songs together, one from John's angle, one from Paul's angle, on the two sides of the single. And you can make an argument yet one more single that the Beatles had their fingerprints on that could be considered one of the greatest 45s ever released.
You could say that about so many of their 45. So,
Yeah.
yeah. All right.
Now, refresh my memory because I forget. Um, were they weren't in the UK? A and B
They
No.
were not,
sides.
they were not,
No,
that was not a single.
I
Mm-mm.
didn't think so. Okay.
Okay. Alan?
It's a really tough one.
Mm.
Part of me is inclined to go with If I Fell for a couple of reasons, like the fact that it's one of the few Beatles songs with sort of an old-fashioned intro,
Hmm.
you know, uh, that then goes into the song. And also, I really, really like the vocal harmonies
Yeah.
on it. But the lyric is a little weird. I mean, we think of it as okay, love song, and we don't really focus in on it. But once you focus in on it, like what is going on? This isn't John really discussing the relationship with the potential girlfriend he's going to be after. He's discussing it with himself. You know, okay, I could break up with the one that I have who really loves me and she's going to cry, but it's not going to be worth it if this new one isn't going to love me as much as the first one does. And that is kind of a strange sentiment to go with. And I love her as a song, as a lyric is like, it's straightforward. It's easy to understand the sentiments in there. Paul sings it beautifully. You've got that incredible George Harrison, guitar riff
Hmm.
going on, and not
Hmm.
just the riff, then he goes into arpeggio. His part there is just exquisite.
Right.
Um, and so I'm gonna have to go with "And I Love Her," uh, just because I think, all told, it's a better song, even though there are aspects of "If I Fell" that I really, really like. I mean, I like them both, but I think it's gonna have to be "And I Love Her."
Okay. Again, I'm emphasizing what you prefer to listen to, not necessarily
I prefer to listen to them
comparing.
both, Ken.
I
Yeah.
know that, but you have to pick one. You should hear when we're discussing ideas for a show, and we'll say, well, what's your top 10 favorite McCartney songs of all time or something? And it's impossible to narrow it down to 10. And Alan will be the first one to say, but you have to do it.
Uh,
So you gotta pick one. You don't pick both.
well, do as I say, not as I do.
All right, Al.
Very tough.
Hmm.
Very, very, very tough. And I Love Her is the first of the great McCartney love songs that he wrote.
Hmm.
And as Alan just described, just a wonderful, wonderful record. But I have to pick If I Fell. That has always been one of my favorite Beatles songs. And there's in that period, there's a whole bunch of great John Lennon songs that I think have kind of gotten, overshadowed by his later, more experimental things. But songs like Not a Second Time
Right.
and If I Fell and I'll Be Back.
This
Even before
boy.
This Boy, yes, absolutely, This Boy, no question. Songs like that have gotten, as I said, just kind of overshadowed, and If I Fell is one of those, and the harmonies that Alan just mentioned are just wonderful,
Right.
and I've always and to go back to what Steve was saying, yeah, the image of the sequence of the song in A Hard Day's Night
Hmm.
also really sticks into one's brain. But just overall, as a great John Lennon song, I would have to go with If I Fell.
Okay. I always think of my wife Joanne when it comes to this because she's always told me that If I Fell is what made her fall in love with the Beatles.
Yeah,
She's
yeah.
very much a harmony person and she
Mm-hmm.
loved the harmonies on If I Fell. And they're both exquisite songs. And one of the things
Mm-hmm.
I love about And I Love Her is the tone of Paul's voice when he sings. It's such a pure
Yes.
voice. It's gorgeous. And I love what you brought up, Alan, about the arpeggios that George plays on that. Makes the song so much, as well as the four-note riff that he came up with.
Mm-hmm.
Can I just backtrack 1 second because I forgot when you talked about What Goes On, that is often a song that a lot of people, certainly whenever I pay attention to podcasts on the internet, they usually point to What Goes On as one of the weakest of Beatles songs.
Well, they don't know what they're talking about.
Okay. I mean, I love it.
These are the same people that crap all over Beatles for Sale, which
Uh-huh.
is a fine album. It's not Rubber Soul. It's not, it's not Meet the Beatles. It's a fine, fine album. And What Goes On is a fine kind of country rock, rockabilly, if you like, song.
Right,
And to which Ringo even contributed a couple of lines.
right.
So again, kind of like secret sauce are these sort of bluegrassy type harmonies,
Hmm.
almost Vince Gill type harmonies that Paul does behind Ringo, especially on the choruses.
Right.
So so no, I don't want to hear
Okay. I want everyone's takes on this. I
it.
love hearing
Sure.
different opinions. Okay, we're going to move on to a solo one.
Hmm.
Two albums from the same year. Would you pick Ram or Imagine?
Hmm.
Alan makes the best faces, best reactions. Why did I start with you this time?
Well, yeah, man, that is really hard, and they're completely different kinds of albums.
Right.
Um, 5 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought about it. I would have said Imagine.
Hmm.
Um, in the intervening time, I've spent an awful lot of time with Ram.
Yes.
I would guess.
And sort of, I think of it differently than I did. But I'm sort of wondering if, Imagine is still sort of tugging at me because, uh, okay, with Ram, you've got backseat of my car, which is worth like any 10 albums by anybody else who wasn't a Beatle. But Imagine, I think Imagine may actually be a stronger album, um, entirely apart from whatever emotional stuff, we've got going on. And backseat of my car notwithstanding. etc. Because you know, Smile Away, I never really, even after working on the whole thing, it just seemed a little bit sort of silly to me. And the same with Monkberry Moon Delight. And uh
Mhm.
Uh,
sometimes silly is good. But on the other hand, the stuff on Imagine is to me more serious in a way. The title track, I Don't Want to Be a Soldier. Um, Give me some truth. And of course, then there's How Do You Sleep, which, now as a McCartney author, I suppose I should have a problem with that, but I
Hmm.
don't. And and at the same time, he was doing one too, aimed at John. So, and that's that's on, yeah. I guess I'm gonna have to go with Imagine, just generally speaking, because track for track, I
Mhm.
think it's a stronger album. But Ram has some incredible stuff, not least don't the
But again, going back to my premise of this show, what you
right.
prefer, not
Ah,
necessarily what you think is better.
yeah. Hmm. Well, I mean, what I prefer is inevitably wrapped up in what I think is better. But
Okay.
I suppose right now, if someone were to say, okay, here's these two albums, play one, I probably would play Imagine. Sorry, Paul.
Okay. Darren?
um, 1000% Ram. Um, I've loved Ram long before it became cool to love Ram. To me, it was it is a quintessential McCartney album, filled with songs that I could see being Beatle tunes had they still lasted into the early 70s. Um, Even the silly moments, like Smile Away and Monkberry Moon Delight, are home runs in my book.
Yeah.
Um, McCartney is great at those goofy throwaways more times than not. When he isn't, they've got some clunkers on his resume, but not when Monkberry Moon Delight and um, Smile Away. Um, to me, it's a perfect pop album. As for Imagine, have you ever had an album that you're listening to and you know this is a classic album, this is a brilliant album, something doesn't appeal. It's not something that really appeals to me all the time. I'm maybe not in the mood to listen to it that much.
Hmm.
And for me, it's Imagine. Um, and I can never was able to put my finger on why I would always rather listen to Walls and Bridges or Mind Games. I know that probably pound for pound, Imagine is the better of those three albums. Um, but to me, I don't know. I can't, I'm finding it very difficult. I've always found it hard to put into words why Imagine was never one of my favorite Lennon albums. Um, it's not because of songs that could be considered throwaways, like I Don't Want to Be a Soldier Mama, because I find that I've liked that song more and more as the years have gone by. Give Me Some Truth is one of Lennon's quintessential solo songs, period. Um, despite what it's about, um, how can you sleep is a classic bluesy rocker. So much going for it, that album. It was Plastic Ono Band. What Lennon said, it was Plastic Ono Band with sprinkles on it, or sugar coated Plastic Ono Band.
Mm.
But perhaps it's my love for McCartney as my favorite Beatle. You pit Imagine up against maybe Tug of War, and I'll take Imagine every day. But up against Ram, few albums have a chance to win out in my book. I never get tired of hearing Ram. Sometimes I can overdo it with certain albums, even other artists. Ram's one of those McCartney albums that I never get tired of hearing.
Okay. Yeah. You
It's
think
it's like a little
sometimes,
musical adventure, that album. There's, ukulele here, smelling people's feet over there, Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey. Now we're in the back seat of the car and you got a Ram and it's all lots of going on in it. And it's all the charms of McCartney, the composer on one LP.
could it be that maybe you have more of a preference for music that's not as serious? I mean, I like to point out Plastic Ono Band because it's a brilliant album, but I
Mhm.
have to be in the mood to listen to it. I can't
Oh
listen to it
yeah,
as often as
yeah.
the other Lennon albums. So,
Yeah. I didn't. I've some. You might be, but just to change one word in what you just said, Ken, I do tend to be a little bit more melody driven.
right,
There's a lot of brilliant lyricists in rock that I worship, but I also find that more times than not, I tend to be pulled in by the melody, the riff. Um, that's the hook, and the lyrics second. Um, And then to contradict that, there's things like "Give Me Some Truth," which to me is I mean the bile coming out in those lyrics to go with Harrison's slide guitar. Can't top that.
right.
There were occasions when some of Lennon's writing I don't totally understand. I never understood well, and what that was about. And to me, it's so hard. It was a little, I don't know, just not something I can what's so hard? Everything.
Going through life.
Not being able to connect with some of these songs really may work against them for me. But we're talking again, like for all of us with all of these, we're getting into really forcing ourselves to find these little picayune details to say, no, I'd rather listen to this album. Um, the other day, my son just moved into a new apartment in Queens, New York City, and one of his roommates had a stack of records, poorly filed and kind of thrown any old way. And my son had to stop me because I was coming to their rescue and fixing them, spines out, you know. And what pops out was an original Apple Imagine album. And the happiness that I felt, oh wow, he's got Imagine. So that right there kind of contradicts what I'm saying about, you know, not totally connecting with Imagine as much as some of the other albums. Yet when I had it in my hands, it's like this is which one of your roommates does this belong to, Dylan? He's got it's all screwed together up here.
Good taste. All right, Steve.
Well, this one is not a difficult choice for me. It has to be Imagine. There's just, I mean, every song on Imagine is, it's pretty much a classic as far as I'm concerned. I mean, well, of course, Imagine, but Crippled Inside, Jealous Guy. I mean, there are so many great versions with Brian Ferry and the Rod Stewart version of
Mhm.
that. Um, uh, you know, I mean, you can go to we can go through the controversy of How Do You Sleep. Um, I heard one of the outtakes of Oh Yoko the other day. Um, but I never, you know, I never took Rams all that seriously, and I still don't. Looking at the the titles of the songs, it's hard to, except for Uncle Albert, which is a great song. Um, I'm just not really enamored by a lot of the songs on Ram as I am on Imagine. So I mean, there's really no argument there as far as I'm
Mhm.
concerned.
How would you explain how Ram has really elevated in status in recent years? a lot of people are now voting it as being their favorite McCartney album, even above Band on the Run.
We'll see. In I mean, I think you have to contend. Personally, I think McCartney has to be somewhere in there.
What, the
And
first album?
yeah,
Okay.
I've always loved the first album, always. Um, but you know, I still wouldn't. I don't think I'd still put Ram above Band on the Run. So
Do you think
um,
that because like Alan pointed out Smile Away and Monkberry Moon Delight as being kind of on the silly side, are you averse to liking songs like that where he's having fun?
well, let's put it this way. I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm adverse to it, but I wouldn't take them all that seriously. I mean, it's hard to. Um, the other thing too, to get to have a uh, contrary argument there is, I think Linda's role in all this has really been elevated. Um, it's gotten a lot more credit than it did back when these albums first came out. I mean, everybody, as you guys know, Linda was really the subject of a lot of criticism.
Hmm.
Um, uh, they've even talked about it. Um, I heard an interview the other day that because I had just recently interviewed, I think you interviewed her too, Ken, Lori Kay,
Uh-huh.
uh, and she um, gave me a part of the interview she did with McCartney, and McCartney talks about how how everybody and Linda talks about it, how bitterly they were criticized for using Linda, and I think Linda is gotten her status has been elevated, and I think it should be. She should get a lot more credit than she did in the beginning. But I still don't think that takes anything past Imagine. I think Imagine is a classic, and I also love Plastic Ono Band too. I remember wearing out I think I wore out 2 vinyl copies of that thing, playing it. I absolutely loved it. Um, but I think Imagine, you know, you can't. I think there's no competition there. I think Imagine goes over Ram any day of the week.
Okay. Well, I'm throwing out at you what people say these days about Ram. They like the
Mhm.
fact that McCartney is very quirky. They like when he experiments,
Sure.
when he's not necessarily trying to have a hit record, even though Uncle Albert was a #1 hit here in the
Right.
United States, but he's having fun doing what he feels like doing. And I will point out one thing about Ram, and I don't think anyone can even contest it. It's got some of the greatest vocals Paul has ever done on record.
Yeah, it does have some great vocal stuff, but if the question is which one are you listening to, it has to be Imagine. So there.
Okay. Al?
Okay, now Alan can probably confirm this because he's been reading Beatle fan virtually since the magazine began. For 45 years, I've said that if you take McCartney, Ram, Wildlife, you can get basically one album's worth of material that's worthy of the McCartney name, because I have very high standards for Paul
Hmm.
McCartney. And Ram to me is about half an album worthy of Paul McCartney, maybe slightly more than half. Then with Imagine, you've got an album that has Imagine, it has Give Me Some Truth, it has How, and it has
How is one of the most underrated songs in John's career.
exactly,
It is a
exact,
brilliant piece of work.
exactly, and you have Jealous Guy
Hmm.
among the rest.
Yeah.
Among It's So Hard and Oh Yo Go and I Don't Want to Be a Soldier. And but just for those 4 songs alone, it makes that album, it makes Imagine an absolute masterpiece of an album. And just start to finish, it's just a not only is it a great album, it's a great listen as well.
Hmm.
And it's certainly more consistent than Ram. So I know, for me at least, it's no contest. It's got to be Imagine.
Okay. And I'll ask you the same question I asked Steve.
Hmm.
How do you account for this elevation of status?
A lot of it, I think, is revisionism because in its time, there was a lot of criticism of Ram, and I think a lot of people uh, didn't really didn't really think much of it at the time it came out. But I
Hmm.
think a lot of Gen Xers grew up with Ram, and I think probably that's why they have a certain fondness for it.
I
Okay.
remember that thing got laughed at.
Yeah.
I mean, really, really badly.
Hmm.
I mean, it was not taken very seriously when it came out at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, but don't you feel that over time, the public's overall impression can change over certain albums?
Oh, sure. Oh, of course it
So
had.
why
You
wouldn't
know.
you think that about Ram?
Oh, it's obvious that it has changed, but it's just in its time when in the '70s, in the early '70s, it really was it was one of those albums that I think the critics kind of looked on as silly love songs.
Uh-huh.
Although let's face it, just I ticked off the great songs on Imagine. You've got backseat of my car, pardon me, backseat of my car, and you've got Heart of the Country, and you've got Too Many People, and you got Uncle Albert Admiral Halsey,
Hmm.
and all great songs. But just the rest of it is just not great.
You
And although what Steve was saying about Linda's harmonies, that's the album where I think she really kind of began to, not unintentionally, because she was still kind of learning her craft, but
Hmm.
that was where the great harmonies that she provided for Paul, and then of course subsequently for Wings, really began to develop.
Hmm.
if I can add
Yeah.
something, if you were talking about Imagine versus Band on the Run, that would be a much more difficult discussion.
Yes.
Much more. I mean, you're talking Imagine is basically the trademark John's trademark song. And
Yeah.
it's hard to come up again, anything it's hard to bring anything from Ram against anything on Imagine. And now Band on the Run would be a different story.
Hmm.
Um, but
Well, everyone's got different tastes. And I know there's
right.
some
Yeah.
people who prefer, like Darren, Ram over
Sure.
Imagine. So you have to respect all
But
different opinions out there. So,
listening to what Al and Steve said, I get it with the content of the album and how if you strictly looked at it like that, you're like, Imagine is such a monumental work. And I think that my love of Ram and my love of McCartney always goes back to my tendency of preferring or at least being drawn in by the melody and the music first.
Hmm.
Right. And I don't care what you have to say, so you can hang up the phone. My phone's ringing and I disappeared and I apologize, guys. I vanished there because my FedEx delivery man will not stop banging on the door till somebody appears.
No.
And he will bang on the door if there's a corpse in here, it will come to life and take the package. So before it sounded like a battering ram hitting my house, I thought, let me go calm down Thumper over here. And so I apologize, but I was listening. But yeah, I
That's
could see, I understand, you're taking songs like um, Three Legs and Smile Away, and you're putting them up against
Yeah.
um, Give Me
How?
Some Truth. And yeah, I understand that line of thinking. But,
Mhm.
you know, I think it comes down to the music side of things for me.
Good explanation there.
Mm.
Okay. I have a feeling this next one's going to be the easiest of them. The album Let It Be or the album Let It Be Naked? Which of those two do you prefer to listen to now? Steve, we'll start with you.
you put me on the spot every time.
Would you like me to start with someone else?
No, that's okay. I mean, basically, as far as I'm concerned, Let It Be versus Let It Be Naked has to do with the production.
Hmm.
And as much, um, let me hang on here. Let me,
Well, let me just interject and say, well, there's more to it than the production, because Let It Be Naked has Don't Let Me Down in it. And you do have a different version of I've Got a Feeling in there, which was a composite of two different takes of it
okay,
right
hang
there.
on. Just, I'm trying to get the, trying to get both of them so I can kind of study them here for a second. Um,
But if I just flat out asked you right now, which you prefer to listen to? Not grading them or saying which yeah.
flat out, probably Let It Be Naked.
And why?
The reason being is, and I have to say that when Let It Be Naked came out, I did not like it. I was really, um, I really didn't like it at all. But after listening to it for a long time, I got, um, I really appreciated the production they had done with the sound.
Hmm.
Um, um, I mean, it's almost a tie because there are sometimes, when you hear certain songs, for example, I've Got a Feeling, especially where if you watch the movie, you know, there isn't, those are closer to the album than they are to the Let It Be Naked version. Um, I guess if there's one thing that takes down Let It Be Naked, it's the revisionist history that McCartney's been really big on. And it's one thing I haven't really appreciated. Um, but the quality, especially if you listen to Let It Be Naked through headphones, is really nice. I mean, there's the old, Long and Winding Road controversy, which is really impossible to listen to. But
What do you mean it's
uh,
impossible to listen to? What do you mean
well,
by
the overproduction by Phil Spector.
oh, that's how you feel about it?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah, the long and the choir and everything. I mean, that was, you know, and I mean, Paul obviously didn't like it
Yeah.
because, so
Could it
um,
just be that this is what the Beatles had originally envisioned Let It Be to be, and he wanted to put it out that way instead of having Phil Spector get involved?
yeah, it could be that too, that would explain possibly um, the whole reason behind behind the Get Back movie. But um, I think, yeah, I mean, you can answer that. I mean, this is a really difficult question, and but I suppose if you're asking me which one I prefer to listen to, it's Let It Be Naked. So,
Okay. Let's go to Al next.
Okay. Um, it's funny because I just heard Let It Be Naked about a week ago for the first time in a very long time. And I think I would have to go. I would have to go with the original album with Let It Be.
Hmm.
Because for one thing, I've never had any of the problems that people seem to have with Across the Universe and particularly Long and Winding Road.
Right.
Plus the horns on Let It Be. I've never really had that big a problem with those.
Hmm.
And one thing I think people don't realize is that Let It Be Naked is not simply the Let It Be album without without Spector's orchestration and with Don't Let Me Down. It's not the same because there are different takes. There's a different take of the take of Long Unwinding Road that's
Right.
on Let It Be Naked is not the take that was used for the original.
Hmm.
That's on the third anthology.
Right.
Um, so I've now it's to be honest, I don't do ranking, but if I had to do ranking, Let It Be is probably toward the bottom of the my favorite Beatles albums. So but I still don't have that big a problem with the orchestration. So I think I would still have to take that over. Oh, and as far as the sound, now the sound on Let It Be Naked is definitely an improvement over the original Let It Be.
Hmm.
But obviously the 2009 remasters kind of even the field there. But overall, I'd still have to give the edge to Let It Be.
Okay. Alan.
Okay. For me, it's no contest. It's going to be Let It Be Naked, because the orchestrations of Across the Universe and Long and Winding Road really do bother me. And the brass on Let It Be, not so much. I think it fits. It's not bad. But you know, I'd heard, as you guys may remember, around the before Let It Be came out, the acetate of the Glyn Johns made its way to some radio stations, and so a
Mhm.
lot of us got to hear that, possibly even taped it, and got to hear it lots of times
No one
before
would do that.
before Let It Be came out. And when Let It Be came out, listening to that, to the pig's dinner that is Long and Winding Road, just I just hated it. Um, Now, in terms of Paul hating it, gotta say, was a sort of footnote here that I sort of learned after the book. Because in the book, I took seriously Paul's objections to it and the Dear Pig letter to Klein and all that stuff. Mark Lewison insists that Paul didn't hate it, that that was all political. And that's very possible because if you
Mm.
look at what he's done touring with it, he doesn't tour with the Let It Be Naked version. He tours with, he's got keyboardists putting the strings on, and on Broad Street, he did it with winds and brass. Um, he seemingly thinks it needs something. But anyway, who knows why? But Let It Be Naked, I have some problems with too. When they announced they were going to do Let It Be Naked, what I was assuming they would do is the easiest thing, which is to put out the Glyn Johns version,
Right.
and that's what I
Hmm.
thought they should do because that is Let It Be Naked. With Let It Be Naked, they edited between takes. They used other takes. Using other takes doesn't bother me. The editing between takes, I mean, that was supposed to sort of violate the whole idea of Let It Be as a live in the studio album. But
Right.
of course, Spector did some editing too, so he doesn't get let off, comparison to Let It Be Naked. But when I reviewed Let It Be Naked for the Times, I wrote, this isn't really Let It Be Naked, it's Let It Be with a fig leaf because of the editing. But sonically, it's great. I love the version of Across the Universe that's on there. I mean, the any of those raw early February takes without extra stuff on it, apart from maybe Galen Pease and what's the other one's name?
Lizzie Bravo.
Right, right. Both no longer with us, sadly.
Yes.
But I really like that version, and I really just like the playing in the studio, no extra, choirs and orchestras and all that other stuff. I like choirs and orchestras on their stuff if it was part of the production planning that they were in on, on the
Good
White
night.
Album, on Pepper, but Let It Be, I thought it ruined, and so Let It Be Naked would be my go-to choice there. But really, the Glyn Johns one, plus maybe an outtake of Across the Universe, would be even better.
Well,
Across
we
the
did
Universe
get
doesn't
the
really belong on there. Let's face it. I mean, it's different
Mhm.
period.
Great
we did
point
get the
there.
Gl- we
Yeah,
did get the Glenn Johns on the Let It Be Super Deluxe. So
right.
Mm.
All right, Darren, your turn.
The original from 1970, um, with all of its flaws, um, it was the first. It was one of my first Beatle albums, um, and it has odd personality to it with the inclusion of some of the spoken bits from the film. Even though they're placed in places where they don't belong, but still. Um, Let It Be Naked to me was too sterile and bland. And I completely agree with Alan. If it had to be the Glenn Johns mix for it to work. I had bought in the 1980s a bootleg of the Get one of the when I thought it was the only one, but then I later found out that there was more than one mix done by Glenn Johns. So one of his
Mhm.
mixes, probably a very commonly available vinyl bootleg of Get Back on gold vinyl, um, was something I played all the time, and I actually was preferring it to the original Let It Be. Let It Be Naked just left me, I don't know, just left me cold. It was too bland, too sterile, too cleaned up. It smelled like it was an album that was there um, for reasons other than cleaning off Phil Spector's production. Paul had a mission with this album and getting it released, and I couldn't get past that. And the fly on the wall concept of the 7-inch bonus disc, I thought was, you know. It didn't work for me. I probably have only listened to Let It Be Naked less than 5 times. It just leaves
Mm.
me empty. As much as I'm not thrilled. I don't hate, but I'm not thrilled with Spector's overproduction of The Long and Winding Road. Still, I go for the original. I really love the album version of Let It Be, with the additional added on guitar solo of George's, which in a way is sort of out of place because it's such a dirty solo in the middle of Let It Be, but I love it. And um, it always comes, a lot of times it comes back to me, it comes back to the fact that these were some of the first songs and albums I heard. I was 5 when Let It Be came out. And to me, I didn't know anything about studio chatter and Phil Spector production and strings. So I was a 5-year-old and I had Abbey Road and I had the Hey Jude album and Let It Be. And that was where, that's why I'm here now. You know, those records.
Mm.
So, you know, uh, I kind of lost my train of thought, but it's probably because it also was really, it was the beginning for me, hearing Let It Be, memories of being 5 years old and my mom taking me to see the movie at the Palace Theater in Parkchester section of the Bronx, and can still picture myself in the theater. Um, I really didn't have any clue what was going on. Breaking up, what? Um, it was the Beatles. They had me somehow at even at that young age, and Let It Be was one of the front and center records for me. Um, I would consider going with something else if it was the Glenn Johns mix. Um, but Let It Be Naked just seems like it was sterilized too much. It
Hmm.
had the life sucked out of it.
All right, you all made such great points. I will maintain, as I've always said, that I love the original Long and Winding Road with the Phil Spector production, and it was a
Mhm.
major hit. It went to number one. And even though I love it, if it was just Paul and a piano and nothing else, I don't think that it would have been nearly the big hit that it was if it was just left as it was. It needed dressing. It needed something on that recording. And I think what Phil Spector added was brilliant. I like all the different versions of The Long and Winding Road. Don't get me wrong, it's a gorgeous song. The song carries itself, but to be a hit record, it needed more than just, you know, stripped down the way that it was. And I like Let It Be Naked a lot. Sonically, it sounds so strong, but I do miss the studio chatter. If this is supposed to be the Beatles as is, what's wrong with studio chatter? That's what they were doing in
Mhm.
the studio.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
reality. That's how they were. And I also love that version from Phil Spector of Across the Universe, but I will agree, stripped down, Across the Universe is gorgeous. On Let It Be Naked and the Beatles anthology as well. So there's pluses and minuses with both, but I probably would prefer Let It Be myself, the original. But I agree with Alan there. Maybe they should have put out the Glenn Johns mix instead. Okay. Um, I thought that this should be about an hour show. We're going to close with one last thing, and it's not even really a comparison of what you prefer to listen to. But Alan knows all about this because he answered the question. Since I did this on my channel, I posed the question in a survey with all of my viewers here, what you would prefer seeing being released the end of this year
Hmm.
for the Beatles, a Rubber Soul box set for the 60th anniversary, or a Beatles anthology box set for the 30th anniversary. Big differences between the two. You can do a lot more with the Beatles anthology than you can with Rubber Soul, but you could also make the argument historically Rubber Soul is more important. Although the anthology is very important for winning over brand new younger audiences to the Beatles, as the Beatles one did. So I just want to get your take on this, and we'll close with that. Steve, what would you rather see? You know what? I made you first. Let's move over. I'll give you a little chance there to think about that.
Okay.
All right, Darren.
What? No, I'm kidding. Um, Absolutely Rubber Soul. Um, I don't know if the music on Anthology really needs to be, well, I guess it does, but I don't know. Repackaging the three albums and adding more material, that'd be fun, but I'd much rather have a Rubber Soul and a continuation of an examination of the individual albums. What they should do, if they want to do maybe a repackage of the three albums, and I'd still spend the money and buy it. But what really needs to happen is the documentary needs to be released on Blu-ray.
Mm.
And I don't see what would be wrong with putting the documentary out on Blu-ray and the book. I don't know if the book is going to be exactly the same or it's going to be revised. Um, and that I think would be sufficient. Maybe add footage, add to the documentary. I don't think the three albums need to come out again or have material added to them because that material that they would add is on the individual album box sets, or should be at least. And some of them we have, and we want Rubber Soul now, and do something with the early albums. If if even if it's just a breakdown take or an alternate take that's pretty much straight through. Um, Treat the albums. Give us anthology on Blu-ray with bonus features and reintroduce the book. That's enough. I want Rubber Soul, a Rubber Soul box set first.
Okay. Well, there's a theory that with the Beatles anthology, well, first of all, I can't see them remixing the songs on the three collections there. They could
Hmm.
remaster them. They could put out
Yeah.
outtakes. And they've been very careful about not duplicating what's on the anthology with what's on the archival box sets. So even with something like the Something demo from George Harrison, there was a difference because one of the versions, the one on Abbey Road, had some organ or keyboard on it that wasn't on the one that was on the anthology. They are very aware of not trying to duplicate between the two. You can clean up Free as a Bird and Real Love, give it the Peter Jackson treatment. You could add more material to the video, maybe from a director's cut, that kind of thing. There's so much more that you can do personally that I feel. But Alan, how do you feel about it?
I would say Rubber Soul without question. Um, the anthology was great in its time, and it's great to have it still. Like
Mhm.
you say, I can't see them remixing it. I'm not sure that adding extra tracks necessarily means taking those tracks from the deluxe editions of the individuals album. There's plenty more stuff. That they could use. The thing is that there's been sort of a philosophical change since the anthology. With the anthology, they Frankensteined various takes together, and so they're sort of outtakes, but they're not really outtakes.
Mhm.
With the individual boxes for each album, I think they've generally speaking given us takes, with their integrity preserved. No flying in vocals, no flying in bass lines, no adding take one to take eight. And they may have done a little bit of that, but I don't think they've done very much. And I prefer that approach. I prefer the sort of, totally documentary, real tracks approach to what was done in anthology.
Mhm.
And I think that that's the way they think now too. So I'm not sure what they would do with anthology. I mean, what would you do? Would you undo all of the edits and things and give us just the takes? But then the anthology takes that we've lived with for what, 30 years,
Hmm.
those those are now part of the canon. So
Yeah.
we sort of, need them in there, even if we disagree with the methodology. Um, but long story short, we need a Rubber Soul box, and we need a Hard Day's Night box, and we need a Beatles for Sale box. And please, please me, and with the Beatles, we want to get. I think it's more important to get through the entire catalog before revisiting the anthology and deciding what to do with that. Although I would like a Blu-ray of it, maybe expanded.
Yeah.
Okay. Steve, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Well, really depends on what they would do with the anthology. Just to put it on Blu-ray is not something I would put a high priority to, only because we have the DVD out there, and if they stream it, which it isn't being streamed now, we'll probably get better quality from that. Um, I don't think that they would expand the three albums, um, for the reasons that Alan said. What I would like, um, stems from a discussion I had with Piers Hemmingson recently on my podcast. And he said that Peter Jackson, and some of you guys may have been there to hear this, Peter Jackson told the Fest for Beatle fans he's working on, or he has interest in the Hamburg tapes. I really want to see the Hamburg tapes fixed up, done a complete, do what you did with Get Back, if you have that capability. That needs to be fixed. The music on the Hamburg tapes is in some spots absolutely fantastic. And nobody seems to have, that discussion is kind of low level. I would like to see it higher, especially since Peter Jackson mentioned it himself. So I would, that I think is probably my wish. I mean, the Rubber Soul box, all the other boxes I assume we're eventually going to get. I hope I'm around to see them all. I don't know that I will be, but I would love to see the Hamburg the Hamburg tapes, and I think that should be a very high priority. They've always had kind of they've always kind of looked down at the Hamburg tapes, and I really think that deserves to get better placement in the Beatles canon. There we go.
Well, the question is, will the powers that be feel that there's enormous importance in those recordings?
That's
And
true.
certainly with today's technology, isolating all the instrumentation, you can make it sound fantastic.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
I mean,
so
bootleggers have played around with it. You guys have probably heard, at least more than one bootleg version, and some of them have improved on it. Not a lot, but they have improved on it. But I mean, if you consider what Jackson has the capability to do, it would be fantastic. And I would hope, unless I'm over guesstimating, I would think that anything, he could do, he has the capability to improve it, to make it, to make it great. Let's put it that way.
okay.
So,
I think
All
maybe
right.
it's time for us to call on Peter to join us again for a third time on Things We Said Today.
A third 4
Because he
hour.
did talk about the Hamburg
Yes.
tapes
what did he
Yes.
say?
on the second show. Refresh my memory, guys. I think he said he's got them and has worked on them, not for any specific thing yet, and he couldn't really go into any more detail than that, but it's on the table, and that was when the second time he was on. It had to be about a year and a half ago.
And I think
He
that's what
said
he
it-
told.
He said he had the lowest existing generation tapes, so
Mhm.
he should do it.
One thing
Right.
I hope that isn't going to happen, that while you guys were talking, I was thinking somebody's going to say this, if the anthology is redone in some form. I hope that they don't go back and give Free as a Bird and Real Love the now and then treatment.
Why?
I don't know. Just leave it the way it is. Don't give us now another version of a song that some people don't even think should be Beatles songs. I strongly disagree with that logic. I kind of like them the way they are. There was a certain magic about Free as a Bird and the way Lennon's vocal sounded. That made it something otherworldly for me, at least. I just have a feeling that that might be something that might happen as part of this whole whatever anthology thing might happen later in the year.
Well, there is a
Unless
whole lot
maybe,
of there is a whole
unless
lot
they
of
put it out. I'm sorry, unless they release them like a new mix and say new mix 2025 mix, something like that. Put them out as an individual single or something like Now and Then was, and don't make us don't re put them on any rehashing of the anthology albums. Um, then maybe that might be a good idea. Blu-ray for the documentary. Um, 2025 mixes of Free as a Bird and Real Love as a single, and you get the anthology book.
Okay. Well, first of all, in response to something that Steve said, bonus tracks on the Beatles anthology, you don't have to put on each volume. You could put it on Blu-ray audio. Keep it separate. Something that wasn't on the original releases.
Mm.
And this whole idea about remixing Free as a Bird and Real Love, there's this whole debate about remixing, period. You know,
Yeah,
there are some people that don't want the Beatles catalog to be remixed at all because that's the way they came out. That's how the
yeah,
Beatles proved it, on and on and on. But then you'll have the other argument of, oh, but if they had today's technology, then it would have sounded better than it did back then. So you can apply the same logic with Free as a Bird and Real Love. Danny Harrison, I know, has said he'd love to see Peter Jackson work with Free as a Bird and Real Love. So anyway, any of you want to chime on that before we end things with Al on the
Well, yeah, there's a whole bunch of, and you guys have probably seen it, talk going around on the internet of what they will do. And everybody seems to know what they will do. And the Blu-ray is one thing. The remixing of Free as a Bird and Real Love, which I really, really disagree with. I really think that's useless. Is another. Um, I mean, I don't, I don't put any stock in either of those, in what people are saying. Because I mean, it's just the way it is. But
do you
yeah,
care for remixes, Steve, of the Beatles
I
catalog?
don't. Of those two songs, no, I
No,
don't
I mean
care.
just in general. You know, you're
Yeah,
here to
I mean, I like, some of the things they've done with the albums. I loved the remix on Sgt. Pepper. I thought that was
Hmm.
but in particular, talking about Real Love and Free as a Bird, no, I don't see any reason to do that at all. I think those songs sound great. I can't imagine what they would do to improve Real Love. And I mean, despite what Peter Jackson did with Now and Then, I can't imagine what he would do with those two songs. Maybe it's just me, but
I think the idea is to get John's vocal track sounding more
Yeah.
like high quality recording of John's voice rather than a cassette recording of John's voice.
yeah.
Hmm.
even so, I mean, I can't see, I mean, we have we've grown accustomed to Real Love and Free as a Bird with what it is. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't see the improvement being that
There
Why
were
do
big.
you want them to improve the Hamburg tapes? We're accustomed to that.
Really? Are you seriously asking me that? Yeah, I mean,
No, I'm asking because it's a logical disconnect. We're
oh, okay.
used to Free as a Bird and Real Love, but but those can be improved. So Hamburg can be improved as well, and why not the same for those two tracks?
Because I don't think the improvement is as steep for Real Love and Free as a Bird as it would be for Hamburg. I think the Hamburg tapes. I would like to have the Hamburg tapes, and this is, wishful thinking, sound as nice as Now and Then. I mean, that's what I want. I mean,
There's
you know,
there was something about the aura of Real Love and Free as a Bird, which will be lost. I think if you cleaned it up too much.
agreed.
Whereas the Hamburg tapes, to get anything out of them, could use some improvements.
I very much agree.
Um, I'm sorry.
I very much agree with you.
Yeah, it's a Free as a Bird and Real Love are two unique, completely unique beasts that kind of go against the grain of a lot of things. You know, they're so unusual in that they exist and they sound the way they do. And had they been done 20 years later, they would sound different. Um, they were a timepiece. And for two songs, unless, like I say, they're redone and they're presented as new mixes and released maybe as an individual edition, an addendum to the whole anthology thing, then maybe okay. But don't discard the ones that we've heard and give us new anthology albums. And I don't want to see them do something like that.
You know where
So I
the
guess what
There
I'm saying is
was
I'm not adverse to them maybe giving them the 2025 spit and polish, but it's not a priority for me. And if it's done, I really would like to see them put them out as, something maybe a little separate. Um, you heard now and then, well, this is what could have happened, and leave the originals alone where they are, and we could still hear them. Because I just fear that if they did upgrade, if they did redo Real Love and Free as a Bird, they'd squash, the original versions.
well,
You know what I'm saying?
there was you say spit and polish. There actually was a spit and polished version of them that was put on the One Plus package in
True,
2015, I think.
true.
And Real Love
But
especially was much improved.
so
But
in a way, I completely forgot about that. So in a way, I just shot a hole in my argument right there because it's
they
been
should
done in a
have.
way. I
What
completely
they sh
forgot about that.
what they should have is on DVD and Blu-ray, there's a capability that people haven't used as much as it could be used, which is the alternate angle. Um,
Hmm.
they could do they could do a version with the improved vocal sound on and the original vocal track, and you could switch between them and listen to whichever one you prefer.
Hmm.
That's all
mm,
great, but not everyone has the ability to, you know, to um
Yeah.
to listen and to enjoy that. I
yeah,
hope to one
that's
day, but I can't right now. That doesn't mean that much to me. But
plus
I
also
think I think it's a priority thing here. I think to me it's fairly. We need to get a rubber sole set.
Yeah.
Yeah.
mhm.
So going back to that question, Al, 1 hour later,
Yeah,
um, Rubber Soul or Beatles Anthology, which I already know what your answer is, but
right. Because I mean, let's face it, it's been 2 or 3 years now, and we know Giles Martin has said that that a Rubber Soul set is said it was probably supposed to come out in 2023, but the whole now and then also releasing the redone blue and red albums
mhm.
that pretty much set that aside. And I forget what was this past holiday season. What came out that
Oh, last year was the red and the blue, and now and then.
oh, that was
And there was
23.
the
But
Let It
what
Be movie.
that was it. Yes. Yeah, I think that was it.
What
And
was that?
yeah,
What was
so
The original Let It Be movie redone.
mhm,
Oh,
Michael Lindsay Hogg's Let It Be movie.
right, the original,
Yeah.
you know, and so as far as I'm concerned, definitely the rubber soul box, which I've been waiting for quite some time. Um, it would be nice to get a Blu-ray version of the anthology, but the problem is that you know, sales of Blu-rays and DVDs have gone pretty much in the tank. And so the possibility of putting out a box of that size now on DVD, or not on Blu-ray, um, it might not be cost effective. So it might very well end up, and I know this is not going to be a popular option, but end up on Disney Plus.
Okay. Wow. All four of you want Rubber Soul ahead of the anthology. The response I had on the video that I posted a week or so ago was, I think, pretty even between the two. So it's just interesting to hear different opinions on this. So as we wrap up, Steve, tell the folks about your podcast.
Well, first of all, there's my Facebook page, Beatles News and Information.
Right.
My podcast is Beatles News Briefs. And it's available wherever your favorite podcast is to be found. I'm on Substack, occasionally doing writing. So, I mean, and my email address is still what it's always been, BeatlesExaminer@gmail.com. I haven't gotten rid of that, even though Examiner is long gone. But
Right.
And I also, by the way, have a bunch of my writings, both from my Examiner days and before that, if you ever want to read what I did before that, at my blog page by Steve Marinucci at blogspot.com. And that's free, by the way. I had actually started gathering together a lot of my writings back in 2004, 2005, somewhere. So there's a lot of stuff there from my newspaper days and God knows what. Some of my Yoko Ono interviews are there. My famous interview with Bruce Johnston, where Bruce Johnston says Brian Wilson is nothing. So, I mean, I've got all sorts of fun things in there. But anyway, there you go. There you go.
All right. Very good. Al, tell us what you have going on. I know that, as we've said before, you continue to write pieces for Bruce Spizer's books.
Right.
And so the newest one is coming out June or July, you were just saying before.
Yeah, I mean the official publication date is in August because it will at least officially debut at the Chicago Fest. But Bruce actually sent out an email a couple of weeks ago in which he said that basically the book is ready to go and that some of the early bird orders actually will be going out in probably June or July.
Okay.
And
the book covers the Help album.
Help.
Is it Beatles for Sale?
Yeah, Beatles for Sale, Beatles 65, Beatles 6,
right.
And Help. And I've got two chapters in there. One on the again using the Change in Times playbook. One on the news events of the basically the 11 months between the end of 64 and November of 65, and then another one on the pop music of, for my money, the greatest year in the history of rock and roll, 1965 plus December of 64, and also still writing for Beatle Fan on a regular basis. And there I have a piece. Actually, it's in two parts. One of which is in the current issue. One of which will be on the next issue. It's kind of a broad based piece on basically a back to the roots piece, beginning with Bob Dylan's John Wesley Harding, which put the brakes on all of the psychedelic excesses of of 67, and
Right.
then going through and also set off the oldies revival first in England and then in America in 69 and in the early 70s, which eventually led to John Lennon's rock and roll album, which came out 50 years ago in February.
February. Yep. Yeah, you sent me a copy of that piece. That was
Right.
excellent.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
And also you can reach me on Facebook, although I know some people are annoyed with all of the anti regime material that I've been posting. But hey, that's too bad. Got it. We all got to do our little bit to, you know, resist.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yes. We still have freedom at the
exactly.
moment, anyway.
For the
Yeah,
moment, yeah. For the
yeah.
moment.
All right. Alan, you want to say anything about
Yeah,
what
sure.
you're up to?
At the moment, I'm sort of totally ensconced in Al's world, actually, because in the prep for Volume 3 of McCartney Legacy, I'm now going through all of the issues of Beatle Fan from 1980 to 1990,
Uh-oh.
scanning and making them into searchable PDFs so that because the great thing about Beatle Fan is since we want to keep track of the other Beatles as well, even though Paul is the focus, but the rest of them are they're in his life, and we sort of need to know what they're up to, and even if we don't put it in the book, we need to know what they're up to at the same time he's up to his stuff. So the Beatles news roundups that Beatle Fan publish in every issue are
Hmm.
incredible because it's like all in one thing. So I'm scanning those, and then I'm doing sort of shading in the areas that are Paul so that you can easily go there because they're not like all together. It's like paragraph about Paul, three paragraphs about George, another paragraph about Paul. So going through all that, and also at the same time watching, Al write something provocative, readers write in and complain, and then
Right.
Al respond. It's great. Uh, so that's what I've been doing lately, and otherwise, but you could reach me on Facebook at Allan Kozinn or Allan Kozinn Remixed. I don't spend a lot of time on social media these days for various reasons, including um, dislike of the various owners of social media.
Mm.
But nevertheless, and you can reach Ken, Darren, and me at Things We Said Today radio show at gmail.com. You can reach me at Allan Kozinn at gmail.com. And I guess that's about it for me.
Okay.
Um, Beatle fan. I'm in the middle of, literally the middle of a three-part series
Right.
about the making of Venus and Mars. The first two are out now, and the next
Hmm.
conclusion will be in the next issue. And it's, based on stuff that's in the book, but it's not just excerpts from the book. I've sort of, redone it, but it basically starts with, the demos and goes all the way through the completion of the album.
Okay.
Hmm.
That's a perfect
Excellent.
segue talking about Venus and Mars. Darren and I just did our show on Talk More Talk, which will be premiering tonight, where we're reviewing the album itself. And then we're going to do a show on things we said today, more about the history of what led to Venus and Mars.
I'll have to
And
read
maybe
my
there'll be
article.
something on my channel here too for Venus and Mars. But what else is going on, Darren?
Well, I'm doing my thing at WFUV on the air Monday through Thursday nights from 10 p.m. till 2 a.m. And Saturday afternoons from 1 until 4, right before Pete Fornatel's Mixed Bag, hosted by Don McGee. I warm things up for Don McGee every Saturday from 1 to 4, and then the late nights Monday through Thursday. And you can listen at 90.7 FM in the New York City metropolitan area. And if you aren't in New York City or metropolitan area, you can listen online at WFUV.org, wherever you are. or get our app and listen to us on our app. And that's basically it. And keeping myself busy with things we said today. As you mentioned, new show next week on Venus and Mars and Talk More Talk. New show tonight, you said? Or tomorrow?
It's premiering tonight on our YouTube channel.
Tonight. And we talk about Venus and Mars.
That's
So,
right. 50th
and
anniversary,
that's about it.
I believe.
And
Okay.
Darren, your Mets are leading the Dodgers 3-0.
Oh, right.
Yes, yes, I did get a peek out of the corner of my eye over there, and I am very aware of that. Things don't change. We've taken 3 out of 4 in Los Angeles against the mighty Dodgers, and maybe
See,
should have won all 4 games.
And the
Um,
well,
Giants are leading 3-2 over the Padres at the moment. So I'm happy to.
it's my son said to me, as they're playing the Dodgers and playing with the Dodgers and beating the Dodgers, um, it's shaping up to be something this season, I think.
Yes,
And
I agree.
there's some cracks in the armor, but and another crack appeared today when it was revealed that Francisco Lindor has a broken pinky toe,
Oh
and
my.
he's going to have to play in pain. But you know, no one's you got to overcome these things.
That's
Yeah.
right. The best teams do.
mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
No, see you in October.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping that one of these days Darren will invite me to a Mets game with him, considering we're both big Mets fans. He's never asked me to
Um,
be at a Met game with him.
no, well, it's almost like my kids. Sorry, get priority, and then you know, um, we're partial season ticket holders to the Mets City Field, and it's mainly me and my son. We go, and my daughter, who used to come with me all the time when she was a little girl, and now will often step in, and she's great because she's very much into the whole environment and the food and everything like that. And I like sit and watch the game, and I'm a blob, and I don't feel like walking around all over the stadium to find gourmet hot dogs covered in asparagus juice. Um, but my daughter will, and that's great. And she'll come back. I go, "Where'd you find this?" She goes, "Oh, it's up on the upper deck in the left." I'm like, and it always comes back to you need to walk and exercise more, Dad. You should go up there and but it's fun. And one day I'll be at a game with Ken. I have a mutual friend who's a relative of Ken's, and it's a small
Yes.
world, who is also a partial season ticket holder. So it'll happen.
And
It'll
when he
happen.
when he offers me tickets, extra tickets, I ask you to join me.
You're making me feel bad now in front of all our listeners and friends here.
That's all
All
right.
right, I'm a heel. I'm a heel.
Okay. So, guys, thanks for being a part of this. And for those of you
Thank you,
watching
Ken.
this, let me know what you think of this idea. I'd like to do more shows with other groups of people that I can round up. And it's always great to have a reunion with you guys. So, thanks so much for being a part of
Mhm.
this. And thanks to all of you for watching. Please subscribe to this channel and all of our channels. And till next time, well, as Paul would say, we'll see you next time. Take care.